Okay, I'm going to talk to you about layers, or as most people like to refer to them as, EDH questions. Because let's be honest, that's where almost all of this comes from is your random friends playing EDH coming up to you and saying, so when I do this crazy thing, what happens? Because blah, blah, blah said this person said this, and I need to know the answer to that. And by the way, my name is Joe Edens, in case you couldn't tell. It's on the slide. Got this upside down. Sorry. Okay, so why layers? Overall, Magic's super complicated game. There's so many different things that can happen, and when those continuous effects start to pile up, you got to know how do you dig through this scenario. As I said, when all of your EDH friends come up to you, you got to know how to dig through it and figure out how to answer what they're asking you. So a few terms we're going to need. CDAs, so character finding ability. It only comes from its own card or token. It's not triggered or conditional. And it's color, power, toughness, subtype type stuff. Timestamp order. So basically, everything gets stamped when it hits the battlefield. It only matters when it applies in the same layer. And I've got a lot of other words to describe that, but that's kind of the nutshell of it. So, just like ogres, Magic has layers. I went ahead and listed the 7 layers here just for good effect so everybody could kind of see what they were, but I'm going to go through them all step by step. So, dependencies. Basically, sometimes an effect can depend on another one. And I've listed kind of the 3 rules that are going to be, it's going to come up several times in our discussion, but whenever we talk about a dependency, it pretty much has to hit those 3 criteria. So both effects have to apply in the same layer. They can't be from a CDA. And it's got to actually change how the other one's working. If an effect's dependent on another, they will be applied in timestamp order unless the independent effect would be applied after the dependent one. If this is the case, the dependent effect is held until after the independent effect has been applied. Then it's applied. Now, I know that's a lot of complex, just random information to be thrown at you. So we're going to go over some of these here in a little bit. So I just wanted to kind of define what it was. So copy effects. Does anybody know what happens when you copy an animated Gideon? So after you take Gideon, uses 0 ability or whatever to make him a creature. Does anybody knows what happens when it copies?
Are we mirror weaving a Gideon onto someone else's board, or we're
Say
cloning?
you just clone it.
And then we're cloning an animated Gideon?
Yes.
So we've got a Gideon, but it's not a creature.
Absolutely. So it becomes a Gideon, but not a creature Gideon. I always found that interesting. I remember the first time one of my friends asked me that, again, I think from an EDH game, because he wanted to know, okay, if I clone my opponent's Gideon that he's activated because I had some kind of flash effect that turns on clone, what happens? So I always bring that up just because it's an interesting part of copy effects. But here's the comp rules on copy effects. If anybody cares, they can either write that down or I'll give you just a second to read it if you want to. But something else to note is what happens when you copy a leveled up creature. It will actually be the base of that leveled up creature and not all the stuff that's actually changed on it. Also, I think he's about to shut the door, so I think that's going to help us a little bit. Maybe. Okay. Control changing effects. Basically anything that says you control enchanted permanent. Enchanted creature, whatever. And I threw some up on the board just to kind of, every one of these I'm going to try to put up some examples so everybody can kind of get a feel for what kind of cards I'm talking about, if you didn't already know. But Control Magic's probably one of the most iconic. I mean, I remember playing with it back around, 4th edition, 5th edition type time frame, so 95-ish, 96. Text changing effects. So things like changing Sword of Mind, or Sword of Body and Mind to blue and black. But Swirl the Mist, Mind Bend. I think somebody's wanted, but I don't know who. All right. Type changing effects. Everyone I'm sure of is aware of Blood Moon and Urborg, making fetch land still usable even when you go to 1 life. It's usually my favorite caveat of it. Doesn't come up super often, I guess, but when it does, it's very handy. These are also going to be the focus of some of our dependency questions, because these guys cause a lot of dependency issues. All right. Card types. Another definition for good measure. Type, creature, land, artifact, tribal, because sometimes you want to max out that goif. And super types, so basic for forest. World enchantment, because who knows what the abyss is. Subtypes, bear, Gideon, Jace. Color changing effects. I think we keep locking everybody out. But Alcor's Tomb's one of my more interesting things. I used to use that in EDH and use stuff to change the color words that it used, or used it to change the colors of various words just to mess with people. Like Circle of Protection, making that EDH deck super flexible. Okay, ability adding or removing effects. Now, if you'll note, Humble actually hits in multiple layers, so I used it to kind of emphasize on that piece. So while it does remove abilities from a creature, it also makes it a 0/1. So it hits in 2 different layers, so sometimes stuff's not just going to affect a single layer, whereas Fear just adds that ability of Fear. But those are the type of abilities. I mean, anything can be added, flying, first strike, whatever. Power and toughness affecting layers. I'm sure anybody that plays Standard's aware of Virtuous Gearholt. But Giant Growth, being able to +3/+3 something, making your Virtuous Gearholt a 7/7 trampler, assuming you didn't put any +1/+1 counters on them. Okay, effects from power and toughness affecting CDAs. So Tarmogoyf's probably the most iconic of all of these. If you've played Modern or Legacy or been around the block a few times, you've probably seen it. If you played EDH, you've probably seen Sarah Avatar. For that person that wants to reanimate it and give it flying and kill you in a single shot. Because reasons. Oh, and of note, when you get to layer 7, that's when we actually get into the sub-layers of A through E, with each one of them really affecting power and toughness various ways. That's why it's a little bit different. I don't know. How many people have actually messed with layers or studied layers or anything yet? Kind of? Okay. So I'm trying to give a baseline to kind of hit everybody, so I'm sorry if it's a little slow for some of you and if it's too fast, let me know. Power and toughness setting effects. Magnifies probably the most common one people have seen. Again, unless you're a big Commander player, I guess even Magnifies, probably you've seen it more in Commander than in anything else, or maybe Modern Masters. But anything that actually explicitly sets the power and toughness. Pretty much everything from this slide I pulled from Legacy Infect. I'm a bit more of a Legacy player myself. So I was sitting there trying to think of what cards to put on this slide, and I was like, Legacy Infect. Yeah, pretty much every card in that deck. So I basically found a list and then just started ripping cards out of it. But Belhaven, Invigorate become immense. Giant growth. Power and toughness changes from counters. I tried to pick all standard cards for this one to kind of give a more of a balance instead of just being my format. But again, Virtuous Gear Hulk, Walking Ballista. And then lastly, effects that switch power and toughness. The important part to remember about anytime you start talking about the sublayers is when you actually get into the 7s, power and toughness comes at the very end. So if you can't remember anything else, this is one of the big ones, because usually when somebody will throw a layers question out there, they'll start giving you all this stuff of changes power and toughness in this way, and then it'll end with, and then they twisted image it, or the twisted image will be in the middle. So you just got to remember, do all the other stuff, then flip it. Yes, you can. That's 0-4 from that you can redirect spells to. Spell Sky, yeah, that guy. All right, so I've got some layers questions now. This is where we're going to get a little more interactive instead of me just talking at you. But feel free, especially as few people as we've got in the room, if you guys want to buddy up, like with 2 or 3 of you. We've got 8 of you, so we break into like 2 teams of 3 and a team of 2. And we can start walking through these, and then I'll ask everybody to kind of answer the questions. If that sounds okay to everybody. And you might want to, if you have any scratch paper or your little judge notebook, you might want to pull out your thing and write some of these pieces down. And you might have to look up a few of the cards. Because I don't think. Okay. And actually, I've got a few of the cards here for you. You're welcome. But yeah. And if you guys need, I can put the layers back on. As far as I meant to actually have these printed out for you guys, so I apologize on that. All right, I'll jump back to the question. Okay. So let's say you have Grizzly Bears. You attack with it before blockers are declared. You cast Giant Growth targeting your Grizzly Bears to make them bigger. After the Giant Growth resolves, but still before blockers are chosen, your opponent casts Avenize on your Grizzly Bears. What does your bears look like? So basically your bear has these 3 effects on it. So it's to basically walk through the layers and figure out in which layer each thing applies, and then figure out what your creature looks like. But again, if you guys want to get together with a couple of you. It might be easier to work through some of these pieces. Thank you. And I'll grab the mic for and when everybody kind of gets an answer, just give me a thumbs up and I'll move on. Okay. You guys think you got an answer? All right. Who wants to actually give an answer? Okay. Just press the unmute button.
It'll be a 3-4 because the layer where power and toughness becomes set to something is 7B. 7B, and when it changes is layer 7C, which is after that one. So it'll become a 0-1 first, and then become a 3-4.
Absolutely. And there's the step-by-step breakdown too. Also of reference, if the bear actually had any abilities, he would be losing all of those abilities. But yes, loss of flavor text. I like it. Okay, we'll move on to the next one then. Question 2. Humility is in play.
What is the review of this card?
We're talking about layers, bro. Every EDH player is going to ask you about humility at least once in their life. Okay. So you have humility in play, and you activate an Ink Moth Nexus. What does the Nexus look like, and what abilities does it have, if any? Question.
This is a time stamping issue because the ability being added to Inkbox Nexus is the same layer as the humility trying to take it away. Humility doesn't say it can't gain the ability, so the timestamp says it does have infect and flying.
That is correct. But yes, you'll end up with a 1/1 flying blink moth artifact creature with infect. Good job. All right, question 3. Whoops. Don't look at the answer. Cheaters. Okay. They get increasingly difficult. It'll not be read if it's not muted. So does everybody have an answer before I let him try to give an answer? Or are you guys still working through it? No, I planned plenty of time on all the questions so that everybody could have a few minutes to work through it. So just give me a thumbs up when you think you're done. And if you need me to go back to any other slides, let me know or anything.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Well, so technically, the weird Crusader is a 3/3 with no ability to the sword. Well,
But it'll still the sword is
yeah, that's a good.
I will add, for a helpful hint, that there is a distinguishment between the abilities on Mirror Crusader and the abilities of the sword. So you guys are onto something with that. So
Yeah, it loses double strike and pro black
that's fair. All right, everybody kind of got an answer? You guys think you have something? All right, you want to?
Because sword is equipped before it's become turn to frog, it'll be a 3/3 without double strike or the pro abilities, and it'll still trigger the abilities from the sword when it deals combat damage because they're not abilities on Mirror and Crusader.
Yep. Mirror Crusader will lose all of its ability and be set to a 3/3. Loses its double strike and all its protections, exactly what you said. And when it deals damage, you still get the sword trigger. Yes. It if you look at the sword. Yeah. Because it said, and it gets.
Oh, I forget what it was. It does because the swords are.
Yeah. You pretty much have to use the sword that way.
Flip the sword after.
It's the only non-pro blue one. Okay. All right. So this is a fun one. All right. Magus of the Moon, humility, and Tundra in play. What are the characteristics of Tundra? And by characteristics also, what does it read right here? I almost said that. Almost said that. No, not at all. As I said, I meant to print you guys out a handout of that, but because I was traveling this last week, left the printouts, so yeah, so if anybody doesn't have the layers brought up, they can bring it up, or I can flip back. What's the question? So here's my question to you: why would it be a timestamp issue? What are the rules about it being a timestamp thing? What's the biggest rule about it? Yes, it has to apply in the same layer. So then your question becomes: do these apply in the same layer?
Because this is applies to the layer that has root abilities that this is. Because humility applies to causes Magus and loses its ability.
If they were easy, there wouldn't be any need to be talking about them. I will admit this is one of the first questions I researched when I was trying to understand layers before I got my L2, because somebody asked me this question and I was like, I have no idea. That is a interesting, great question, and it's kind of stuck with me ever since. Because, I mean, realistically, for a while, Miracles was running Humility. Miracles would play against Magus of the Moon decks from time to time, so, I mean, it could come up. I agree. I'm going to let them get a crack at answering. You guys think you got an answer? Yes.
Okay, our consensus was that the Magus of the Moon would turn the Tundra into a mountain, and it would say land mountain.
Is it a basic land?
No, it's still a non-basic land.
Yes. Okay, so Tundra's a mountain. Magus of the Moon ability applies in layer 4. Abilities are not removed until layer 6. Good job. You guys are killing it. All right. Now's where you guys get to hate me, because now's where we're getting into the really saucy questions. Yes, you have our answer. I used to love to play chains with Anvil Bogarden. Okay, so in play you got a Grizzly Bear, which has already had Giant Growth resolved on it, a Bog Wraith enchanted with Lignify, and a Figure of Destiny with its third ability activated. I then cast Mirror Weave, targeting the Figure of Destiny. What does each creature look like?
Because I know when you're
I'm going to give them another second to come up with an answer, and then I'll go ahead and pass you the mic so you can be ready. So I will throw in the hint. Remember what I told you guys on the copy piece at the beginning about creatures that level up? This kind of follows that same pattern. It was a planted hint. Wink. Sure.
Okay, because the copy layer is the first one, Bog Wraith and Grizzly Bears will both be a 1/1 figure of destiny.
Okay.
And as the later layers are applied, Grizzly Bears will be a 4/4 figure of destiny from Giant Growth, and Bog Wraith will be a 0/4 figure of destiny because of Lignify. And figure of destiny will be figure of destiny, 8/8 with whatever abilities its third one gives it.
Okay, so let's step by step go through this. Okay, so you think Grizzly Bears will be a figure of destiny. What do you think its power and toughness is going to be?
4/4.
Okay. Bog Wraith.
0/4.
0/4? Okay. What?
Oh
Okay.
yeah, and a tree folk.
Okay.
My bad.
What about its Swamp Walk?
Just Lignify, say it removes all abilities. Yeah, creature lose. Okay, so it'll be just a 0/4 tree folk. No
Okay.
Swamp Walk. Actually, I think it would lose Swamp Walk when it became Figure of Destiny. Because Figure of Destiny does not have Swamp Walk.
Okay. What about Figure of Destiny's powers on it?
What was that again?
So Figure of Destiny has all the level up abilities?
Oh, it'll have the abilities until Lignify is applied to it, and then it'll lose those and become a 0/4 tree folk.
Okay. So there's an infographic of what they'll kind of look like. As you can see, the bear named Figure of Destiny. It's a red-white. It's got a red-white mana cost now. 4/4 power toughness. Has all of the level up abilities. Your Bog Wraith became a Figure of Destiny. That's a creature tree folk 0/4. So absolutely right. And then your Figure of Destiny is a Kithkin Spirit Warrior avatar. Yes. Absolutely.
Why would you do
That'll apply until the end of the game, right?
Yeah.
Or until it changes zones?
Yes.
this? Until the end. I think Mirror Weave applies.
Yeah, but it'll lose the ability, but it won't stop
Yes.
being
It,
spirit.
If you have the mana, you can also.
Yeah, you can just
Just dump your mana into it. It becomes an 8/8 bear.
it's the way to make a bear more than a bear.
well, it'd be an 8/8 bear Kithkin spirit avatar.
8/8 Kithkin Warrior Spirit Avatar Bear.
Okay. So dependencies. So I'm going to kind of abbreviate all the information I have here. Basically, for a dependency to apply, they both have to apply in the same layer. Applying one would have to change the other, and not from a character-defining attribute. That's sort of the nutshell. But here in my last piece, I actually have the example of Blood Moon and Urborg. So they still affect the same number of lands. However, if we apply one before the other, we get a different effect depending on how we apply it. And since the effects change how it affects the other one, that's where we get the dependency from, is because it actually affects the other one. And I have some examples with this too coming, but does this make sense to everybody so far? Okay. So I have a dependency question. So I've actually got sort of 4 questions here as part of this. But of these card combinations, which are applied in timestamp order, which are applied in a dependency order, if applied in a dependency order, which of the 2 cards is dependent, and then with a bonus question of which layers do they both apply in. I actually have a better question about that coming up. Yes. So it makes all enchantments creatures. But yeah, actually the 2 I figured people would ask about is what's Conspiracy and what's Straw News Crusade.
Honest Crusade is,
But when everybody's got a bit of an answer, let me know.
I think humility or timestamp.
Okay. Do you have an answer for the other ones too? When somebody's ready to give them a crack, let me know. Or if you just want to give a crack at a specific one, and then we can all work through the other pieces.
Timestamp.
Goblins. It says in parentheses goblins. Oh, the one above, you can just assume goblins there too. You're right. Missetting that one. Sorry. Good catch. That's why you're a judge. So something to keep in mind is to think about where all of these apply in the layers. Because as you remember, to be a dependency or to be timestamp dependent, they have to apply in the same layer. And then to be dependent, applying one a different way would have to change how the other one acted.
My question is, what was it taking away text from the card? It's just adding.
It's setting power.
Yeah, it's not actually changing text from the card. Like it's not removing text.
It also sets power.
Okay, you've got answers. Who wants to try to crack at the first one? Go for it.
Giant growth and lignify is a trick question. They don't apply at the same time. Lignify is layer 7B, and Giant Growth is layer 7C.
That is the absolute correct answer. Good job. Who wants to take a crack at number 2?
I'm going to call this one a dependency. And I'm saying opalescence will apply first, turning conspiracy into the creature type the conspiracy has named.
Also absolutely correct. Good job. What layer do they apply in?
That is type changing, and that'll be layer 2. 4.
But
4.
Fantastic.
4.
All right. Conspiracy and Droll News Crusade. Is everybody understanding this so far? You have questions?
Set everything to goblins, then they're goblins outside of or in the game and deck wherever, and then draw knows make all goblins a zombie in addition to that. So, and the +1/+1. So I don't think they are dependent. I think they coexist happily. If that makes sense, or it could be. I guess dependency could be. No, I don't understand.
So here's the question. Do they apply in the same layer?
They do apply in the same layer. Well,
Okay.
yeah, no, it does. Yeah, so they do.
Okay.
So one does add zombies to that layer, but they don't override each other.
Okay, so they apply in the same layer. If you apply them in a different order, would it change how they work together?
Yes. So you do have to have it in the right order for them.
So they would be.
They would be dependent.
Okay. And which one's dependent on the other?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's layer 4.
Yes, also layer 4.
Cool.
And then the last one. Greg, did you want to tackle that one? Because I know you're sitting there chanting through the whole thing that you had the answer to the last one.
No,
so.
I said I think it's
We're judges. You don't say, I think the answer is. You say, the answer is this.
right.
Yes.
The answer. Appeal incoming. I think opalescence and humility are timestamped because they both apply in the layer that adds and removes, or not, excuse me, sets power and toughness, layer 7. So I think it's an issue.
Which sublayer?
Which sublayer? 7B.
Yes. Correct.
But I have a question.
Okay.
What happens if I cast Replenish and put these both into play?
Yes, I think that is the case.
Oh, fair enough. Okay.
Okay. But, yeah, there's all the answers in print if you didn't believe me. But. Dun, dun. Okay, this is a final question, just for fun. And you guys can feel free to hate me if you want. Yes, it was.
What is going on here? Both players need to be ejected from this tournament. I think this is the one time you should be able to flip a coin and determine the outcome of the Magic game.
I'll tell you what's going on. EDH is going on.
Okay.
I know.
I actually do not think that I have pictures of the cards here on this one. I think the biggest problem was there were so many cards to put on here that I could. But yes, which I will say we're almost out of time. So,
You have a bunch of one goblin.
did you say 5 or 15? Okay, that's what I thought. I thought about doing that too, but I was planning on, I didn't know how many people would show up to this session. I was planning on like 30. At that point, it's like 30 copies of 10 sheets. Now, a fun fact, this was a still enchantment effect. And then I realized that, oh yeah, when it becomes a creature, it would fall off. So I had to change that. Nobody caught that at the mini.
Yeah, because we read this and we're just.
Sorry. This is the kind of question you ask just to be a jerk. Absolutely. Your EDH friends. Yes, they are.
Well, they're one. No, you have goblins, zombies.
So, I am going to try to share this somewhere, but for right now, we're almost out of time. So I'm going to go ahead and flip to the answer and let you guys kind of see what was going on. Huh?
No, because you have Shared Triumph and Drallman's Crusade. So,
But
two goblins.
here is your layer by layer of where everything is happening. Copy enchantment becomes opalescence. Blatant thievery takes conspiracy. Swirl the mist changes draw news black to blue. And there's where other non-hour enchantments become creatures in addition. You repeat it for the second opalescence. Then all Justin's creatures gain goblin. All goblins become goblin zombies. All goblins become blue. All creatures lose their abilities. Then you have where opalescence sets the stars. And then because of the last timestamp, everything becomes 1/1s. And then Shared Triumph, Knight of Souls Betrayal, and Draw News Crusade apply. So basically all enchantments other than Confiscate are 1/1 creatures. And pretend that Confiscate isn't there. But yes, that is my last question. Yeah, sorry. Again, I tried to originally set up a infographic with that for everybody to work through, and the screen was just cards. So I was like, eh. But okay, did everybody learn a lot from it? All right, well, thanks for the attention, everyone. I appreciate it. Hit me up on Slack or whatever if you have questions. I'll also try to share the PowerPoint out, but if I don't get a chance to, if you hit me up over Slack, I'll email it to you or something if you want that. But thanks, everybody.